Next on Currents News, the worldwide summit to forge a stronger union of young people in the Catholic Church began this morning. The stakes are high. We have team coverage.
Hundreds of Catholic school children gathered to honor the Blessed Mother. I'm Tim Harfman, and that story is coming up.
The Pope's poll numbers take a hit. Researchers are linking the decline to the sex abuse scandal. Plus, a new squabble over the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court nomination. This time, the president is getting flack from members of his own party. The news starts right now. The highly anticipated summit to help better connect young people to the church began today. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. The world's bishops gathered in St. Peter's Square this morning, where Pope Francis celebrated an outdoor mass to begin the synod. Melissa Butts is standing by at the Vatican with the latest.
Hundreds of bishops and youth gathered this morning just behind me in St. Peter's Square for the opening mass of the Synod, where Pope Francis naturally addressed the bishops, but cited many things he learned throughout the year with his preparatory meetings with the youth. Wednesday morning was full of a special kind of excitement at the Vatican for the kickoff ceremonial mass for Pope Francis's second Synod of Bishops. Pope Francis mentioned the requests of young people, including their desire for accompaniment.
I giovani, frutto di molte delle decisioni prese nel passato, ci chiamano a farci carico insieme a loro del presente con maggior impegno.
He also directed a special message to the Synod Fathers, reminding them that the final message of the Second Vatican Council was directed to them.
E per voi giovani, per voi soprattutto, che essa è con il suo concilio ha acceso una luce, quella che rischiara l'avvenire.
Yet the Holy Father's most emotional moment came when he was welcoming the bishops from mainland China, who were present for the very first time.
Oggi, per la prima volta, sono qui con noi anche due confratelli vescovi della Cina continentale. Diamo loro il nostro caloroso benvenuto. Dell'intero episcopato, con il successore di Pietro, è ancora più visibile grazie alla loro presenza.
In honor of the Synod, the front of St. Peter's Basilica was decorated with two tapestries for St. Joseph and St. Michael the Archangel. It was a reminder of the Pope's request to pray for the intercession of the Archangel in October. At 4:30 p.m. Rome time, all of the bishops entered Paul VI Audience Hall to have their first meeting of the Synod with Pope Francis. Thus begins the intense 3-week period where the bishops will discuss youth and vocational discernment. Yet surely, the abuse crisis will be in the minds of many of the bishops who are present here in Rome. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News. Back to you in New York, Liz.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much. In just a few moments, also from Rome, the national correspondent of the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. His insight on the summit still ahead in this newscast. Brooklyn native Frank Caggiano, the Bishop of Bridgeport, Connecticut, is a delegate at the Synod. He's got blunt advice. Tackle the sex abuse crisis head on. He says that's essential in order to have credibility with young people. He hopes the Synod will tackle the scandals with, quote, not just words, but some significant initiatives. And he adds it's about leadership being accountable. Pope Francis requested all Catholics to pray the Rosary daily during the month of October as a defense against Satan in a time of turbulence. In the Brooklyn Diocese, young students stage a Rosary rally, and Currents News' Tim Harfman reports on that.
Catholic elementary school students arrived by the busloads to the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn.
Nice to see you guys.
They're taking a special field trip for the Rosary rally to strengthen their devotion to the Blessed Mother.
And it's really spiritual to me, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to come here today.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for our sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Grasping their sacred beads, hundreds of young Catholics from Brooklyn and Queens recite the glorious mysteries of the Rosary.
First thing you need to do is say the Apostles' Creed, then say the Our Father, then say 3 Hail Marys, the Glory Be, and then you say the Our Father again, then 10 Hail Marys.
And they continue with each decade, led by Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop James Massa.
We're passing on the faith to another generation.
The bishop explains the connection the children have with the Blessed Mother, who is depicted throughout the co-cathedral.
There's a special relationship that Mary, the mother of the Lord, has with children. She is a second mother, the heavenly mother.
She inspires me a lot so that one day, if God wants, one day I can become a nun if God wants.
She has a close connection to Jesus, so praying to her is almost like praying to him, because he has to listen to his mother.
Bishop Massa also encouraged the children to have a special prayer intention for each bead.
Today I'm praying for my parents, some extended family members.
For my family in Ecuador, so that they can be healthy.
Since it's the beginning of the school year, kids can stay concentrated throughout all the blur of life.
And through the Rosary Rally, the children hope their Heavenly Mother answers their prayers. In Prospect Heights, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
The U.S. Catholic Church is taking emergency action to help people slammed by natural disasters, especially Hurricane Florence. The head of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, is calling on all American parishes to take up a special collection. The funds would go to those devastated by Florence and any other natural disasters that might occur the rest of the year. The widespread sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church seems to be undermining confidence in Pope Francis. A new poll just out shows the percentage of U.S. Catholics who view the Holy Father favorably is down. 72% are telling Pew Research they have an overall favorable opinion of the pontiff, but 62% rate his handling of the abuse crisis as only fair or poor. The favorable number, while strong, is down 12 points from earlier in the year. Capitol Hill is tense tonight as the FBI investigation of Brett Kavanaugh heads to a conclusion. President Trump set off a news squabble after comments about Kavanaugh's accuser. Omar Jimenez reports the latest.
As the country waits to see if Judge Brett Kavanaugh will be their newest Supreme Court justice, President Trump is standing firmly behind his nominee, which now includes mocking the woman accusing Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct, Christine Blasey Ford, accusations Kavanaugh denies.
How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know.
The day after, Democratic and even some Republican senators unhappy with the comments.
I don't like what the president said last night. I'm the first person to say, I want to hear from Dr. Ford. I thought she was handled respectfully. I thought Kavanaugh was treated like crap. Yeah, well, boo yourself.
Some senators expected to be key, even potentially deciding votes in Kavanaugh's confirmation.
The president's comments were just plain wrong.
Is it going to affect your vote, Senator?
It's just not right. I wish he hadn't have done it. Just say it's kind of appalling.
But Senator Jeff Flake adding the president's comments would not affect his vote. Wednesday, the White House defending those comments.
Every single word, second by second, of his testimony has been picked apart. Yet if anybody says anything about the accusations that have been thrown against them, that's totally off limits and outrageous. This entire process has been a disgrace.
Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is pushing to begin voting as soon as Friday. In Washington, Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
A new summit between President Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un is in the works. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is going to meet with Kim on Sunday. He's expected to lay the groundwork for a second summit. At the same time, Kim's hackers are being accused of trying to steal over $1 billion from global banks, with several of those attempts hitting pay dirt. In Indonesia, desperation is growing as the death toll from the massive earthquake and tsunami rose to more than 1,400. Aid officials say there is an urgent need for food, clean water, and medical supplies. Matt Rivers has more from Palu.
Well, the aid operation finally appears to be growing here on Sulawesi Island. Days and days after this earthquake happened, the government response does appear to be increasing. More planes are landing. Those planes have aid, and then they're taking people who need to be evacuated out. Ships have arrived bringing aid. They're also going to take people out. More rescue equipment has been brought to this part of Indonesia to help with operations like behind me here, where people could still be trapped even alive 5 days on after this earthquake happened. However, there still remains a ton of frustration with the Indonesian government. You talk to people in these camps that have been set up for the people homeless after this event, and they will tell you that they are frustrated by a lack of drinking water, electricity, food, hygiene, healthcare. The list goes on. As for the death toll, it continues to go up. And the reason for that is that they keep finding bodies in places where it's been difficult to look. We saw that firsthand today in a village that was the victim of what's called liquefaction. So during this earthquake, the ground underneath 744 homes that were subsumed by the earth, basically the ground became like liquefied. It had qualities of a liquid, which means everything on top sunk below. So these homes were essentially buried in the mud. We saw that today, and it just becomes all the more worse when you think about people are still buried in there and authorities are still trying to reach them. So yes, the aid is increasing, rescue operations continue, but do expect that death toll continue to rise. It will continue to rise as authorities continue to just understand the full scope of this problem. I'm Matt Rivers in Palu, Indonesia.
A new apology tonight from the leaders of the Catholic Church in Chile. They're embarrassed over guidelines for priests that were posted online. Priests were advised to avoid some contact with children that could be, quote, misinterpreted, rather than because it would be wrong. The church yanked the guidelines, saying they were a mistake and a crime is a crime. Chile's President Sebastián Pinera will meet Pope Francis at the Vatican later this month. There's a lot more news headed your way. National correspondent Christopher White from Rome on how the Youth Summit will tackle the crucial topics not on the official agenda. Catholics in Northern Ireland are demanding change, claiming they're being kept off the police force. A special look at a police story in the latest edition of The Tablet, Brooklyn's Catholic newspaper. And do you have a story idea, something happening in your parish we should know about? We want to hear from you. Keep this email handy, newstips@desalesmedia.org. We'll be right back. Now, more of Currents News team coverage of the first day of the Worldwide Summit of Bishops to better connect young people with the church. The highlight was this morning when the Pope celebrated an outdoor mass in St. Peter's Square. A total of 50 cardinals, nearly 200 bishops and young people, along with experts and auditors taking part. The Synod is being described as perhaps the most important summit of the Francis papacy. The national correspondent for The Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, is in Rome as part of a large Crux team that is covering it all, and he joins us now. Christopher, thank you so much for being with us. So this highly anticipated synod begins as the church faces several crucial issues: the clerical sex abuse crisis, empowering women to have greater authority within the church, and so much more. So what was the atmosphere like this morning in Rome?
Hi, Liz. Good to be with you. The atmosphere, despite the heaviness and the high stakes, this morning was honestly very joyful. Lots of colors in the crowd. People, before the Mass chanting. Banners were being held high. It was a very festive environment, despite everyone knowing that what's going to be taking place over the next month is some serious business ahead.
Chris, definitely important to note that the prime focus of this synod is connecting young people with the church and also promoting religious vocations. So what's on the agenda to help these things happen?
Well, Liz, what we have is about 300 delegates from around the world, most of them bishops, but some priests and religious brothers, and then young people themselves. And what we're going to hear over the next week are individual interventions, as they're called, which means just sort of individual testimonials as to what these particular individuals, from their own world perspectives and their own experience, bring to the church and think that the church can contribute to young people and that young people can contribute to the church. And so we're going to first hear from them before they all break out into individual groups and start working through this collectively on a synod-based approach.
Christopher, the Holy Father has already shared a message during his homily this morning. Francis urged everyone involved with the summit to dream and to hope together. But how do the bishops and the young people together take those words and turn them into actions?
The Pope said this morning, Liz, that young people should, challenge the church. And then he also spoke to the Synod Fathers, the delegates, saying, don't be stuck in old ideas, don't be moralistic or ideological, and don't say just because it's always been done this way before, we have to keep doing it this way. But he also said to young people, let's not forget the past. The wisdom of the elderly is what sustains the church. And so what we're seeing here is a bridge that he wants to establish where young and old alike can meet together and have a fruitful conversation in the month ahead.
Christopher, we mentioned that there are a lot of key topics on the table there. How will the Synod tackle the abuse scandals and other critical topics?
Well, Liz, that is the elephant in the room, the issue of sexual abuse. I mean, think about it this way. This is a synod on young people. And the church can't ask what it can do to young people or what young people can do for the church unless the church shows that it can actually protect and take care of young people, particularly minors and vulnerable young adults, in its own institution. So the very credibility of the church is at stake in getting this issue right. So while it's not an official theme of the Synod, it certainly is pervading the atmosphere here, and I think we're going to hear about it almost every single day.
All right, Christopher, really quickly, now that the official ceremony is finished, what's next?
Lots and lots of talking, lots and lots of dialogue and meetings. I mean, it started this afternoon. The Pope had sort of laid out his State of the Union of what he expects, and now it's time for the delegates to give their own opinions.
All right, Christopher, always good to talk to you. We'll be checking in with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Many residents of Northern Ireland are calling for recruitment quotas to account for the lack of Catholic officers in the department. Just 20% of recent police recruits are Catholic, but 50% of the working age population in the country is made up of Catholics. Officials are considering all options, including reintroducing a quota policy. First Lady Melania Trump is continuing her first solo international trip. Mrs. Trump visited Cape Coast Castle today, which was once a major outpost for international slave trade. She calls the experience very emotional.
This is a very special place. I will never forget. Incredible experience, and the stories that I heard from the gentlemen. It's really, really touching.
Melania continues her week-long trip with stops in Malawi, Kenya, and Egypt while promoting women and children's health. Tonight, a special preview of the latest edition of The Tablet, the newspaper of the Brooklyn Diocese. This week's front page features Italian pride on parade during a Williamsburg procession for Padre Pio. And here to tell us about another story in The Tablet is the newspaper's editor-in-chief, Jorge Dominguez. Thank you so much for being with us, as always, Jorge. Now, Jorge, this story is one about a mass in Graves and Brooklyn for police. Tell us more about that.
Well, it was the Mass of St. Michael, who is the patron of the police officers. But, and so they have that Mass every year for the police force.
Now, there's a theme there that was celebrated at that particular Mass. It's called With Arms Wide Open. What is the mission of that particular vision? How do people go about helping children? Because it was about special needs, wasn't it?
It was a very interesting thing. This is one detective and one police officer. They both have children with special needs.
Yeah.
And they decided to start this initiative. And the interesting thing is, and you have to read the whole story in the tablet, that police officers are used to be in charge to help others. And sometimes they have a hard time accepting help from others. So they got together to help all the officers who have children with special needs. And that's what they do.
What was the general mood for the Mass? I could just imagine it was one of compassion and celebration.
Oh, of course. Actually, the Mass, they have a special collection for this new organization, and they presented the son of the detective who started he has Down syndrome. He's 5 years old. He's adorable, and he was, you know.
He really is adorable. I saw his pictures in the newspaper. So you said they took up a special collection. So do you have an update for us?
Well, yes, they tell me now that they collected around $2,000 during the mass, and they are going to have another special collection for the organization.
That's wonderful. And where does that money go? How is it used?
Well, they say that it depends on the needs of every person or every family. Some families need like a wheelchair. Other families need some money to start a treatment before the insurance bureaucracy kicks in. So they say that this is not a fixed solution for everybody. They adapt their help to the needs of every family.
Oh my goodness, stories like that really make it worthwhile. Thank you so much, Jorge. I really appreciate it. You got to check it out in the tablet, right? No spoiler alerts here. You got to check it out. The Catholic press is vital, bringing to you important stories that really just can't be found anywhere else. But the Catholic press needs support to get that news to you. Subscribe to the tablet right now. You could save up to 55%. Go to the website, thetablet.org/home55, or you can call 1-877-883-8356. Still to come on Currents News, a record-breaking number of voter registrations, plus a remarkable story of discovery that found the crucifix and dog tags of a World War II veteran. We'll be right back. A record number of new voters could cast their ballots this November. During National Voter Registration Day last week, over 800,000 people signed up to vote in the midterm elections. That's well over double the campaign's goal. Registration is still open around the country, with October 9th being the drop-dead date. An Oregon man got more than he bargained for when he found something that he knew he had to return. Currents News' Michelle Powers reports.
When Jordan Philo went to move the 1940s vanity he and his wife purchased on Craigslist, he heard a strange sound.
We were hearing like a little bit of, clink like that.
In between the drawers, he found some dog tags and a crucifix.
It had two initials and a last name. It says O.A. Kennerly on it.
Jordan's own father was in the military. He knew he needed to find the person's family.
I did a bunch of internet sleuthing, and anytime you type in Kennerly, this guy David Kennerly, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer, comes up.
David Hume Kennerly, an Oregon native, has been a photographer on the front lines of history for decades. Among his many accomplishments, his photos from the Vietnam War earned him a Pulitzer Prize. He was also a photographer to President Gerald Ford.
David Kennerly's photos are so cool, so I started going through his stuff, and then I went to his Wikipedia page.
That's where he started reading about a man who could be the photographer's father, a man with the same initials as the tags.
Yeah, and I was like, wait a minute, O.A. Kennerly, like, what the heck?
Jordan contacted the famous photographer. It turns out his late father, Orlai Aldine Kennerly, served in the Army towards the end of World War II. He doesn't know how the tags ended up in the desk, but the photographer says it's a remarkable find. Jordan is now returning the tags and the crucifix to the family. As a token of his appreciation, the son is offering up something pretty special too.
He said that I could have one of any of the prints of his that I get to choose.
Michelle Powers, Currents News.
Now that was a really great story. That is Currents News. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Liz Faultless. Set your DVR to record this program so that you never miss it, because we are putting your faith in the news, and I hope to see you again next time.